eyes in the sky, gazing far into the night. I raise my hand to the fire, but it's no use, 'cause you can't stop it from shining through. It's true, baby, let the light shine through. If you believe it's true, baby, won't you let the light shine through for you, for you, for you, for
Hi everyone, welcome to Deception Detection Radio. I'm Kay.
And I'm Chad.
We pray you all had a blessed week.
There's an announcement I would like to make before we get into this week's episode of Deception Detection. After much prayer and then a confirmation, Deception Detection Radio has decided to accept donations. After 2 years of broadcasting, editing, and everything else involved, equipment is starting to wear out. So if God places it on your heart to donate, it can be made through PayPal to deceptiondetectionradio@yahoo.com. Prayers are also very welcome. They are so important to the ministry. For either, we are eternally grateful. Thank you, and God bless you all. Now to this week's exciting episode.
Tonight, Chad and I are so excited to welcome Brien Foerster and Joe Taylor to Deception Detection Radio. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. How are you?
Great, thank you.
Good. Well, it's wonderful to have you. We're just all over the place tonight, aren't we?
That's a good thing.
Yes, all over the country, the world, and it's interesting. Joe, would you like to say the opening prayer, please?
Sure.
Okay.
Heavenly Father, we ask you might be with us tonight, that what's said might be true and useful to those listening. We pray a blessing on all those that are represented here tonight, all the families, keep them safe. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Well, gentlemen, if anybody has not heard of Joe Taylor of the Mount Blanco Museum or Brien Foerster down in Peru, I would have to say you've been living under a rock. These guys are very well known, and we're very humbly excited and blessed to have them on our episode. And
Yes.
Definitely want to hear about some of the expeditions that these gentlemen have been on together, and what they have planned in the future as well. So we're going to be all over the place on this episode. So with that said, would you like to talk about some of the, let's see, where would you guys like to start off at? How about that?
Why don't we let them tell everyone a little bit about themselves?
Okay, yeah, that'll work.
And then
Brian's name starts with a B.
I guess, Brien, he's telling you to go first.
Okay, my name is Brien Foerster. I was born in the U.S. but grew up in Canada. And from early childhood, I always had a fascination for ancient mysteries and ancient history. I've traveled to over 90 countries. For a period of time, I was a professional totem pole carver because I've always had a fascination with indigenous cultures. I spent years traveling through Polynesia, studying the Polynesian people. And then about 12 years ago, I wound up in Peru just on a whim to visit, and was so fascinated by the megalithic structures and the elongated skulls that are found in this area that it now consumes all of my time.
So exciting that you wouldn't want to do anything else.
So did the work demand that you move there, or did you got so sick of traveling back and forth there, you just decided it would be in your best interest to move there?
Well, basically that was, I just found Peru more and more exciting and Canada less and less exciting. So over the course of years, I'd go back and forth. And then eventually I just bought a one-way ticket, and with the grace of God and faith, I moved here, and it's been successful ever since.
That is awesome. All right, Joe Taylor, it is all you know.
Well, I started my professional art career in New York City, doing design, illustration, and all kinds of other stuff. And I was in a band in art school, and I grew up with music, so I continued that. My brother and I did some stuff there in some of the places in New York. In fact, we opened for Neil Diamond once, I think, and another group called the Electric Brick. They weren't very good, but we're right around the corner from Bob Dylan's Hangout and things like that. It was an exciting time. It's when the hippies were getting going, and even though I looked like a hippie, I was actually an anti-hippie. I was the reverse, and I was sort of working with the Salvation Army a little bit to get runaways back home and get them off the street because the streets are pretty rough. So I went from there to actually back to Iowa where my folks had moved and designed. I started designing alphabets. I actually started designing alphabets in the Army. And when I got out, I sold the first one to a big house there in New York City, Mergenthaler Press. So I kept designing alphabet type fonts. And when my buddy got out of the service, we went to Los Angeles and fell right into the middle of the Sunset Strip there, where everything was happening. Music, art, the Jesus movement got started pretty quick. But the hippie thing, the Hare Krishna, all those groups, and dozens more were on the street. So it was really exciting and very educational. A lot of it I just didn't really understand. So I had to open my mind and go, I'm going to understand this. And that's kind of what I do today. You know, a lot of people shy away from the weird stuff in Peru, Bigfoot, or any questions about UFOs. But, I've been studying anything all along. So it just felt natural to when it was my chance to go to Peru with Ellie Marzulli and Brien, great, whatever it is. And whatever it is over there, it ought to be fascinating. And it's more than fascinating. It's just, it's indescribable how interesting that whole country, Bolivia, all of that stuff over there is. But in LA, I got involved also in the billboard painting business. And I've painted every cotton-picking rock star and country singer, some of them half a dozen times. In fact, I'm hopefully about to publish a book on all that stuff because I kept a camera with me. And I got into the music business and was doing some recording. Then a bunch of little kids lived next door to me, didn't have dads around, so they kind of adopted me and stuck to my legs, and I had to give up the music business and eventually moved back to Texas to continue raising some of the kids. Well, that put me back in Mecca for bones. Right here in Crosbyton, we're in three directions. There are famous fossil beds, so I already got into that. And I'd started off in LA at the La Brea Tar Pits, which introduced me to several PhDs and a lot of information. And since I could name drop these guys, that opened the doors here in Texas. And when I could name drop them, that opened doors in other museums, New York City and so on. So it really immersed me in the fossil business. Well, when you get into fossils, eventually you're going to get into giants. And you're going to get into, in my case, since I mold and restore and reproduce, anything that can be reproduced that's interesting is going to come along. So that's how Brien and I really got working together. It's because I could reproduce stuff, and I was also fascinated by the history. I just wanted to know what it was all about. Brien knows a lot of stuff, and he's been around, like he said, almost everywhere in the world. So what I bring to the table is not only a mutual interest and fascination, but since I can mold, that has sort of given me filled a niche there that was missing, and has allowed us to have something to study when we go back home and tell people we've got more than just a film or a video. We've got something they can physically touch, which is very similar to the real skull. So that's sort of how we got going on it. I'm antiquarian, probably like Brien. I've always been fascinated by the old stuff, picking things up off the ground, and I'm an avaricious reader of anything and everything. So that's sort of how we got together on this.
I guess, did you want to start out talking about the museum that you've been doing a lot of work at down there?
Sure. About 6 years ago, my wife and I were coming back from Chile, and that's a long bus ride. So we decided to stop in this little town of Paracas because it's by the ocean. And basically, the first thing we did is we found out that there was a small museum that a man called Senor Juan Navarro owned, and we went inside, and that's when I saw my first elongated skull. It was, in fact, mummified. So I started to ask questions of Senor Juan, and he said, well, I have more at home if you'd like to see them. And I said, yeah. So he, the next morning, he brought boxes full of other skulls, and I started looking up on the internet to find out about these very obscure people called the Paracas, and there is almost zero archaeological study of them. So that's what started my fascination, because academia wasn't covering it, and my personal fascination more or less overtook me, because I wanted to find out who these people were, where they came from, why they had elongated heads, why they had red hair, and why they seemed to be such an anomaly.
Now, are most of these elongated skulls, are they found out there in that desert area, the sand?
Yeah, there's one site, one major site specifically that Joe has been to called Chongos, and there are 3 or 4 other what you would call royal cemeteries, because all the people who had elongated heads were of the royal class of that civilization.
Okay. And
So they kept them together when they were buried? Like they had their own area?
Yeah, it actually depends on which of the 4 major cemeteries. There's one where it was the equivalent of mausoleums, where deep pits were dug through the limestone, and then when a family member would die, they would be added to this mausoleum, whereas in other locations they would be buried individually. Yeah.
and I know
Makes
that
you wonder how they got through all that rock.
That's true.
The ones out in Nazca that I went to, looks like they dug a pit out there in the more or less hard sand, and then somehow got enough water in there to make these big adobe bricks and lined these large rooms, which apparently held many family members until they were opened up with the grave robbers, and then covered in wood, I believe, Brian, some of them. And there's just no wood out there, there's no water out there, and you wonder how in the world to get all that material out there. And to dig through limestone to put in a grave, what it says to me is they apparently thought a lot of their dead. They went to a good deal of trouble to bury them and preserve them, and the way they wrapped them up, and all the stuff they put in with them. So that's one of the things that struck me, was they went to a lot of trouble to bury these people.
Did they have them wrapped in the fine cloths that we had talked about on the other interview with you, Joe? The very intricate weavings?
Brian probably knows that better than I, but some of them that I saw were wrapped in, 100 or a couple 100 pounds of cotton and maybe material, but then covered in a material on the outside with, in some cases, the heads were exposed, apparently. Brian probably could speak better to that than I, because the ones I saw had already been disturbed by the grave robbers, and the government had put them sort of back like they were, but they were wrapped up in a lot of cotton as far as I could tell, and Brian, like I say, knows more about that.
Yeah, they were. The royal people were usually wrapped in several layers of, as what Joe said, was cotton, which is indigenous to the coast of Peru. And then the outer wrappings would be very fine textiles, usually made of alpaca and llama wool that was dyed in an incredible variety of different colors. Joe, of course, was the one who assisted in unwrapping the 20-month-old royal baby Paracas skull, And so he had direct physical contact with the textiles themselves.
Yeah, that particular one had a little, maybe a half-inch band woven into one edge of the long cloth that covered the baby's head. And it was, I believe, a background of yellow, this really like a golden yellow, bright yellow, with little crabs, maybe a quarter-inch big, alternating up and down in purple and turquoise, and they were still bright, beautiful, bright colors. It was amazing, and the tassels on the other side of the cloth, they were so perfect. They looked like they'd been turned by a machine. It was just really, again, that they went to a lot of trouble. Somebody thought a lot of that child.
And do y'all know about what time era this is? Did y'all have any of it carbon dated or anything like that?
Yeah, it was carbon dated at 1930 years old, plus or minus 30 years, I think.
And Brien, real quick, could I get you to explain a little bit about the elongated skulls and the parietal plates and how that we can tell that these are not completely human?
Yeah, well, the majority of the Paracas skulls and almost all of the elongated skulls that are found around the world are the result of cranial deformation or headboarding. So that's done soon after birth, and again, only in the royal class of any society. But there are some anomalous ones which look physically like they're natural shaped. They don't look like they could have been cranial headboarded because they're just too complicated. Also, the sagittal suture, which all human beings have, is missing, and there are two holes in the back of the skull, which are called foramen, which were for blood flow to accommodate for the larger cone-head-shaped skull. Also, the eye sockets are larger, and there are other physical characteristics which are very curious. And honestly, recently I was at Lake Titicaca with a radiologist from Texas, and he and I found a little museum that had a full skeleton. The skull was at least twice the size of a normal human being, and upon examination, this radiologist simply said, that is not Homo sapiens sapiens. That's not a human.
And didn't y'all also do a brain capacity test where y'all actually poured rice into the inside of the skull to test and see a typical human skull versus one of these elongated skulls, and it had, 2/3 bigger than a normal human skull or something like that?
Well, actually, Joe was there, Aaron Judkins was there, L.A. Marzulli was there, and we did, in some cases, the cranial capacity seems to be about 35 or maybe 30% larger than normal, but the ones in Bolivia that we recently discovered, they appear to be much larger.
Also, I wanted to ask you about the genetic testing that you've been doing on the Paracas skulls, the elongated skulls. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. We were able to take samples from 3 of the Paracas, and because the museum is actually a private collection, all we needed was authorization from the director himself to be able to take the samples out. And also L.A. Marzulli tested another skull from Peru, not Paracas though, that's in an American collection and has been there for probably 80 years. And only the mitochondrial DNA was able to be tested, but the results were fascinating because the haplogroups, and what a haplogroup is it describes your ethnicity. So if you have several different haplogroups involved, then that means that you come from a very complex heritage. But the only haplogroups that we were able to find from the 3 Paracas skulls indicated European and or Middle Eastern ancestry, not Native American ancestry.
I'm just going to be a skeptic on a lot of that because some of the DNA stuff we've seen over here, it's so hard to believe some of it. So I want to know more. That's why we need to do more research and more testing of these things, and that's, as Brian can well attest, it's not that easy, to get the material, to get the money and all that. So it's to me, it's still an open book, a very fascinating book too.
Chad and I have discussed about the difficulty of bringing anything from another country into the United States, and down in Peru, South America, that it's extremely difficult to get anything across into the United States. Why is that, and what do you have to do to get a yes from them?
Well, Peru or the government of Peru is now very protective about anything pre-Columbian, artifacts of any kind, like ceramics or gold or silver, because there's been so much plundering going on. There are more Peruvian artifacts outside of the country than inside the country. And in the early part of the 20th century, major museums around the world would simply buy these materials and ship them home to, the Smithsonian, the Metropolitan, the British Museum, etc. There were no laws against that at that time, but in the 1960s, the Peruvian government started to really put in heavy laws restricting that. So that's why with the future DNA testing, we have to go through the Peruvian government and make sure we get approval in order to be able to export even something simple as hair samples.
Is South America one of the places that the Smithsonian cannot go in and grab anything that's been found? Is
not
that
anymore.
Off limits?
Yeah, not anymore. That was, of course, that was the case in the 19th century when the Smithsonian did a lot of collecting, one could say, especially in the U.S. of proposed giants' bones, etc., like that. But now it would take a lot of paperwork and negotiation for the Smithsonian to come and even inquire about taking things from Peru.
There is so much stuff over there that, like Brian said, they were depleting the country of its history without giving them anything back for it, really. So they've got to be pretty tight. Otherwise, too many people just go in there and heavy-handedly grab everything, and that's so. But it makes it difficult for serious research. But that is the problem.
Brian, I was going to ask you about Ecuador. Have you been down to Ecuador?
Not yet. It's on my list, maybe for next year.
Okay. Are you going to go and check out any of the Father Crespi artifacts?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, a friend of mine was there about 6 months ago, and he said that there's very little that's left because most of it's been stolen or sold off, etc. So the big Father Crespi collection was broken up into many parts after his death, and there are many wealthy collectors in Ecuador have the vast majority of it, as far as I know.
This friend that you're talking about, would that be Hugh Newman?
Actually, Hugh Newman and Jim Vieira.
Oh, okay, so you're friends with both of them, okay.
Right.
Okay, yeah, we actually talked to Hugh Newman last night. We had him on.
Oh, great.
Okay, so I guess you guys want to talk about anything in particular that has really jumped out at you guys and a lot of the research you've been doing?
Well, actually, I'd just like to say that Joe is the most amazing mold maker. I have never seen anybody with the capability to reach almost perfection. The replicas of the Paracas skulls that he has created are so realistic that I actually was trapped with the immigration people, I think in Dallas. It was either Dallas or Houston. They X-rayed my luggage because I was going to a conference in the U.S. and I wanted to bring the replicas with me, and it took half an hour to convince them that they weren't they weren't real human skulls.
Nice compliment.
Very.
One time I was set up at the Dallas State Fair, and when I really had only mowed a couple of North American Indian skulls, but I had one of them there, and it looked just exactly like the real thing. And this lady came up in her 30s, professional lady, and she looked at it. She adjusted her glasses, got closer, and she looked at it. She says, "You're not allowed to have that on display." I said, "Oh, really?" "Well, it's just plaster." She says, "What?" I said, "Yeah, that's just a reproduction." "Oh, well, she's about to have me arrested." I said, "Well, thank you." I'm a portrait painter, so I've painted, I think I figured up, I must have painted portraits of at least 1,500 or 1,500 portraits of famous musicians in the 70s and 80s. So I'm good at making things look like the real thing. So I just sort of applied the portrait painting to canvases of plaster. It's plastic and plaster is just a 3D canvas, basically. So I just paint whatever I see, I just paint on there and try to observe the texture and all that and figure out some way to get the texture, which isn't always easy. These Peruvian skulls, there's a lot of variety in their preservation. And some are heavy, some are light, and some are dark tan and brown sometimes, and the lighter colors. Most of them are lighter color than I've seen, but they have a slight translucence to them, and that's really hard to get because you can't paint that. So what I usually do is I cast something so it's slightly translucent, and then I go through a kind of complicated process of stains and paint and removal and all that sort of thing to get that translucence. I can tell you one secret. A lot of times I work on the teeth. I use nail polish. So I'm always going to the little local store over here and buying baby powder, nail polish, and all kinds of other stuff that belong in the kitchen and some lady's dressing table. And, I look like a homeless man that's got paint on him. And they just sort of look at me like, why is he buying all this stuff?
That is a strange combination.
Yeah, well, half the stuff I use comes out of the kitchen. I mean, it literally does. The knives I dig with out here in the States, my favorite digging knife is a cake decorating knife, which the metal halves all the way up into the wood, all the way through the wood. So it's great. You get it in your hand, and it'll chip right through rock. So it's a lot of the casting companies that do really good work, but they more or less paint their skulls. And I think if they took the time to do what I do, maybe it'd cost too much.
Brien, I know one of the things that I definitely wanted to talk to you about is Baalbek.
Sure.
Please tell us about the magnificent Baalbek and all the interesting things there.
Well, it's a fascinating area, and Lebanon itself is a fascinating and very beautiful country. I was very struck by it. To get to Baalbek, you drive from Beirut, which of course is the capital, located on the Mediterranean Sea. And you drive about 3.5 hours up into the mountains and then down into what's called the Baca Valley, which I thought was going to be a desert, but it's actually an incredible agricultural area. The farmers there make so much money that they have massive houses. And once you drive through that, then you get to the town of Baalbek itself. And the first stop that we made was at the quarry. And inside the quarry, there's one stone called the Stone of the Pregnant Woman. Mm-hmm. I don't know why they call it that, but it's at least 1,200 tons of limestone, and it's still attached to the bedrock. So whoever was working on that giant block never finished it. And then in another part of the quarry, there's probably about a 1,000-ton block of limestone that the Romans at one time tried to break into pieces, but they basically gave up because it's just too big. And so from the quarry to the Baalbek site itself is about a mile, and it's quite hilly. So there at Baalbek itself, you find what's called the trilithon, and those are 3 stones that weigh at least 1,000 tons apiece, which are lined up with smaller stones on top. And then there are other walls containing stones of about 800 tons apiece. And on top of that, the Romans built their temples and things like that. But our tour guide insisted that the Romans did all the work, and we just, basically broke down laughing because the scale of these things, these stones are as large as a bus.
Yeah, they're huge, and I mean the people, they can't respect how huge and how heavy these things are until you like literally lay eyes on them. And that's one of the things I'm very thankful for is a lot of the videos that you've done where you've gone out there. And didn't they actually find a stone underneath the stone of the pregnant woman that was supposedly even bigger and heavier than that was buried underneath?
It's actually the bedrock underneath. So it looks like whoever was doing the work had extracted these 1,000-ton blocks from the site, but for some strange reason, the work almost instantly became interrupted. Something happened at Baalbek that stopped the project. So that's what the Romans found when they got there. They found these massive 800, 1,000, 1,200-ton blocks of some kind of construction, and then they simply built their structures on top of what they found.
And what was the Moss scale on the blocks there? And also, could you break that down for people and explain to people what the Moss scale actually is?
Sure. It's a scale of hardness of any material. So the hardest natural material we know of is diamond, which is 10. And actually, this is quite a soft material. It's limestone, so it's about 3.5. It could be possible, or it is possible, to shape limestone with bronze chisels, but nothing on the scale of 1,200 tons. One very curious thing is that, again, the archaeologists all insist that it was the Romans who had excavated these 1,000-plus ton blocks. And then when you ask them, well, why did they work on such a scale? They say, well, it was to impress the local people, because there's nothing in Rome itself which is of that scale. The other curious historical thing is that in order to drive to Baalbek, on the right-hand side, you see Mount Hermon, which, of course, is very important in the biblical studies. It's normally covered in snow, and that, of course, is supposedly where the ties in with the whole story of the Nephilim.
Interesting. I didn't realize it was that close to Baalbek.
Yeah, it is.
Wow, that's very, very interesting. I also wanted to ask you real quick about the Temple of Jupiter. Is it still standing out there in Baalbek?
It is. Most of Baalbek is in complete ruin, unfortunately. We also found 300 granite columns, and granite is not a local material. We had a geologist with us, and she said that the granite itself probably came from Aswan in Egypt. So that's a distance of about 1,000 miles. And these things were so smooth that it looked like they had been turned on a lathe, and some of them were 20 feet long.
Yeah, I remember seeing that in the video that you put up, that you could definitely tell that they had been machined, and that there's no way they could have done that with copper chisels and all that.
No, they're as perfect a finish as a Maserati.
And also, could you talk about some of the boring and the ancient technology, the cutting marks and stuff like that you also witnessed out there?
Yeah, we didn't see so much of it there. I mean, we saw machining, like polished machining in these granite columns. But in Egypt, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of examples of drill holes, and engineers and machinists have estimated that whatever kind of tube drill was involved in that had an efficiency 500 times more efficient than a 21st century drill.
Wow. Yeah, because I know that some of the engineers have said that there's... Hey, Joe, can you hear us? Joe?
Yeah, I was off again for several minutes. I don't know what's happening. Hey, I had a question for Brien, though, while he's on Baalbek.
Okay.
How far is Baalbek from Mount Hermon, Brien?
Actually, yeah, we were just talking about that because in order to drive to Baalbek, Mount Hermon is on the right-hand side. So I don't know how many miles away it is, but it's a very large mountain from the perspective of the highway. And it's, at the time we were there, it was covered in snow.
Is that in? That's not in Israel though, is it? Is it right over the border? Baalbek?
Yeah, I think Mount Hermon is on the border of the two countries.
And Baalbek is over in another country, Syria.
It's in Lebanon.
Lebanon. Okay. Did you have any trouble with getting across the border with that?
We just stayed in Lebanon, so we drove from Beirut to Baalbek, which took about 3.5 hours.
Okay. Well, Aaron, who's not able to be here tonight, and I are planning to be in Israel in January, and Mount Hermon is going to be my second stop with my brother Tom, filmmaker guy. So I'm looking forward to that. In fact, he knows it's snow covered because he's planning to do a little skiing there.
Wow.
Are you guys going to go near the Temple of Pan and the Gates of Hades and all that?
Yep. Yeah, it's on the list.
Y'all are going to get that on video and everything?
Yeah, I've been there before, but I'm going to go back now that I know more. But yeah, that's one of the definite spots.
So what is some of the work that you're going to be doing over there in Israel when you go?
Well, mostly I'm going to be examining the geology and the paleontology, which is pretty scarce. But I want to look at the geology and the paleontology, and of course it's all connected to the archaeology over there. And because there's probably no place in the world that's more has been more written about and is better known than the Bible lands because of the Bible and other books like that. So we go with a lot of knowledge, but we want to put a face to the place, you might say. The other thing we're going to look at is my brother's a cowboy and a farmer, and he's interested in seeing, what they're doing over there. There's, it's sort of a desert, but yet they've sort of turned it into a farming paradise in a way. So we want to look at some of that, and not going to do the normal tourist thing. We'll see a lot of the standard stuff, but the churches and things like that are the big hot spots for tourism. They don't really tell you very much about the ancient history. So unless I'm studying the rocks that they're built out of, we're not going to be spending much time there. But there's a dinosaur trackway site that I'm very interested in seeing. They've turned it into a tourist spot now. So I'm really looking forward to looking at that and seeing how it relates to what we find over here in Glen Rose, Texas.
Now, are you going to be doing any work with Aaron at the Dead Sea Caves out there in Qumran?
No, that's just him, and he barely got in. So we'll get together with him when they wrap up there. Then we'll get together. We're hoping to go down to Petra, and I'm not sure that Tom and I are going to make that. We may be going back up I want to go to the Ramon crater up there and see that. But if we could get to Petra, that'd be great because it's a fascinating sight.
Yeah, I would love to see Petra. That gigantic doorway, that archway they got there. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and it goes on forever. It's like Peru. Somebody moved a lot of rock in the ancient world. I mean, it's like, what else did they do but cut rock? Just amazing.
Yeah. Have either one of y'all been to Turkey and been to the underground caverns, the underground cities there?
I haven't.
Yeah, I was actually supposed to go earlier this year, but Turkey is in such a mess now with ISIS that it's gonna. I think it'll be off limits until something, until something's enforced there. It's very sad.
Yeah, it's very sad.
Yeah. Aaron was just there, 2 years ago to make that film, Finding Noah. But it's air rat's a whole other thing. It's a dangerous mountain to go up on. It's just the storms and the weather. Is really difficult. But a lot of the Middle East now is going to become difficult for a tourist to go anywhere in. There's a lot of fossil stuff in Iran. I'd love to go there and see where it came from, but it's just become problematic.
And do you think that some of that has been heavily engineered to keep people from going in there and looking at a lot of this stuff?
I don't know. I don't really know. They're so busy with the military movement over there, on both sides, that I don't know if there's a deliberate effort to keep people from finding out about the ancient artifacts and the sites. I don't know.
What do you think, Brian?
I think it's mainly a war over pipeline construction. You have conflicting pipelines that are being put in, and so you have external influence from different countries meddling, and unfortunately, most of the Middle East, or a large part of it, is just becoming a complete mess and nightmare right now.
That's what it looks like on the news for sure.
Yeah.
The sad part is all the different artifacts that could end up being lost because of a war.
I think a lot have already.
Yeah, there's been.
I do too.
And especially over there in Iraq and Iran. I mean, they basically plundered that place.
And Egypt.
Yeah. Brian, what have you been to Petra?
No, we may be going in March.
Okay. Now, do you guys? I know that you've got a drone that you take up and you fly it around and get good aerial shots. Are you going to be taking something like that with you guys, Joe?
Yes. Yeah. That's the filmmaker guy we're going with is got one of those or a couple of them. I just think it's a great technology, and the stuff that Brian's put on the online lately, it's beautiful stuff. I mean, it's just amazing. The quality is incredible. All of his shots are smooth. They're beautiful. They look like look really professional. And I'm dying to pay and download some of them eventually. So, Brian, I'll do a little business with you eventually.
Okay, that sounds great, Joe.
Yes, Brian, we are all very thankful for all the wonderful material that you put up on your website. You are a plethora of information, and we truly do appreciate all the amazing and wonderful work that you're out there doing.
Thank you.
Yes, we do. And Joe, you do amazing work too. What is it like when you uncover something? I mean, what's the excitement like? Because anyone who hasn't done it has no idea. Is it like an adrenaline rush?
Well, I can speak for myself in digging up dinosaur bones, or buffalo bones, or horse bones, all that stuff. You don't know you're uncomfortable till you've dug 2 or 3 hours and haven't found any bones. Then you realize, oh, this is really uncomfortable place I'm sitting in. Because it's never, you're always sitting on rocks or hard spots or on a hill, or the weather's awful, or it's cold, or it's too hot. But once you start finding that bone, all of a sudden all that fades, and it's even the buffalo bone. I've found thousands of them, but it's just something about it. It's like finding a coin buried in the ground. You never would get tired of it. And also, from my perspective, I'm trying to pay attention to what kind of dirt it's in. Are there seeds with it that I can see? Is there rocks that shouldn't be there? Why is a bone here? How is it laying? Was this a random bone? Is the rest of the animal there? And is he associated? Is he disarticulated? All this stuff tells a story. If you just dig the bones up without seeing how they're laid, you're losing a lot of information. And usually, when I dig a bone up, if it's in good shape, like buffalo bones usually are, you don't have to take the dirt out with them. But I always, as soon as I get the bone up, I take a segment that was directly under the bone, and I keep that in a clean bag with provenance, so that later on it could be analyzed for pollen, volcanic ash, seeds, all sorts of stuff that would tell us something about the environment when that bone was buried right there. With dinosaur bones, most of them are broken, so you've got to take the rock or the clay or the sand out with them, and you don't know what's underneath the bone until you get into the lab and prep out one side and then turn it over. And that's a complicated process, but it's really exciting to be digging along on a big leg bone or something. All of a sudden, here's a little bitty bone. And this one we dug up in Colorado, one of our digs in Colorado, we were taking out the hips of a big sauropod. It's about a 5-foot square package. I think one of the largest field jackets ever taken out without a Huey. We built a special trailer and got it all plastered up and turned over onto that trailer. And apparently there was on top of that thing's hips was part of a fish. And it was the animal was actually upside down, so it's on its stomach. So if you can imagine finding a fish jaw that was probably not more than 3/4 of an inch long, but it had like 17 teeth in it, and they're sort of white. The bone is black. So I very, very carefully recorded that. But if one chip with a hammer, you would have lost it. Wouldn't have even known it was there. But what that tells you is this is a land animal that's buried in a water environment, or water environments mixed in with a land environment. And that fish tells a lot of information. Plus, the animal's laying upside down on his back, and animals don't die that way; they die on their side in a normal event. But yeah, it's tremendously exciting. I haven't dug very much human stuff. The one that I did dig was accidental. I thought it was an ostrich egg. I was in one of my buffalo sites down deep here in Texas, and I saw a circular bone, about the size of an ostrich egg. And I thought, oh man, this is incredible, because nobody ever found an ostrich egg here. It'd be a fossil. So I carefully dug it out and took notes and samples and did drawings and everything, and brought it back to my lab. And when I got around to cleaning it up, I started removing the dirt, and it's going down just like an egg, and all of a sudden it bulges out. I go, wait a minute, what's that? This can't be an egg. So I kept going, and then I realized, oh my gosh, it's somebody's head. So the top half of the head was gone, most of the head was gone, and all it had was the bottom half and the brow. So we couldn't tell it was male or female, and it was old. The root etching was severe, the most severe thing I've ever seen. And roots get onto bone, and they eat the bone away. So the bone gets real rough and pitted. And this thing, the parietals and the occipital were actually separated because there was so much root damage there. But I got it apart. I had x-rayed in the dirt and x-rayed after the dirt, and took it to one of the top forensics guys in the country over here at Texas Tech. And he said, yeah, it's probably a young woman, which is what I thought. But we couldn't tell definitively. But so that was great. In Peru, there's so much stuff over there, and Brien he's probably seen some of these guys dig. You're digging in sand, basically. There's nothing better than sand. I don't know how much Brien has watched of that stuff, but I think they use different tools over there, don't they, Brien, to find the grave or find the artifacts? Don't they use probes?
Sure. Yeah, that's right. On the coast, it's basically all sand. So that's why, for example, the Paracas skulls were so well preserved. Up where I am right now in Cusco, it's a very temperate climate. So quite a bit of rain, very rich volcanic soil, which is not good for preservation of human material. But that's why the Paracas area is such a treasure trove, because it rains half an inch a year. And that's why, as Joe was indicating earlier, we can find artifacts of textiles 2,000 plus years old that look like maybe they're 5 years old.
Yeah.
Brien, how close are you to Tiwanaku?
Let's see. It's about a 1 hour flight to La Paz. and then about a 2.5-hour drive.
Wow. Yeah, see, that's the thing. People don't realize how much driving is involved in all the hiking, the hours of hiking it takes you guys to get to a lot of these places.
Well, those are long drives, but really they're fascinating. They're sort of like Texas. Out here in West Texas, people complain, where are all the trees? Go, we don't want trees. We can't see anything with the trees, so we can look out and see everything for 50 miles. And that's at least where Brien and I were together. You just drive for a long time. You can see everything for miles and miles and miles because it's so flat and desolate. And then you go into near the coast and all that. But I didn't find that boring. I thought it was exciting because to see little houses or ruins out there, you think, gosh, how do they have to have water brought in today probably. What did they do 2,000 years ago?
When you say that you can see for 50 miles, how do you know where to start looking? What are your clues? How do you know this is a spot I need to check?
For fossil bones?
Yes.
Well, pretty much here. Now in New Mexico, a couple of hours west of here, the bones are on the top of the ground, mammoth bones. And so in a dust storm, it'll uncover them. And that afternoon, it'll cover them back over. So they're pretty much right under the surface. Over here, they're down from 30 feet to 300 feet. And the only way you find them is where the water has eroded, mostly from the abatement of the flood, cut all these massive canyons in here, same way in Qumran, and exposed all the strata that had been laid down. So it's eroded down to 300 feet, and that puts you right in the bottom of the swamp that used to be here, which is where the giant crocodiles, the giant salamanders, and all that stuff is. And above them are strange mastodons, and above that are mammoths, and above those are buffalo in the sand. So I just go to the draws, and pretty much anymore I can tell by looking at strata, at least here in the States, I can get a pretty good idea which ones are going to be productive for fossils. And, I've read a lot of stuff, so I'm kind of familiar with it. In Peru, we weren't where there were many fossils, but I know from what Senor Juan showed me, he had collected quite a bit of sea creatures, and I saw some things in Ica, Peru, that were, I don't know if they were dinosaur or mammoth. I didn't get a chance to examine them, but Brien, where was Senor Juan finding those trilobites and the sea creatures? Where did he go for that?
Yeah, that's about it's about 2 hours drive south of Paracas, which is an hour south of Ica. It's a little town and very desolate area called Okukahe, and that was an inland sea. So they found full whale skeletons and giant turtles and all sorts of things there. It's a real amazing treasure trove of what ancient sea life looked like.
Right. I think there was it at Ica or Paracas where they found the giant penguins 6 feet tall that still had feathers and flesh on some of them under sandstone?
Yeah.
Is that Ica or Paracas?
Yeah, that's Ica and a little bit south of Ica.
Okay.
I've never heard of that. Could you tell us a little bit about the giant penguin?
Yeah, there's your DNA. I mean, if you've got a preserved skin and feathers, you've got DNA more than likely. And the bones, they're huge. They're about 5 feet or taller. They have a long head compared to the ones that are living today. But there's also a giant sloth found out there, and sloths are land animals that hang out in trees or around trees. But there's like thousands of whales buried out there, and they're buried complete with their baleen still intact. We were going to go out there. Senor Juan was going to take me, but at that time my back was in such bad shape that we didn't try to make the trip. But I saw some in the museum there in Lima, and that changed my mind about going. I had proposed a dig there in the whale beds through another guy, but once I saw the bone material and how hard the rock it was in, I said, forget it. Unless you live here, you are backed by the Smithsonian. You couldn't do it. So I've dropped any plans of digging up whales in Peru or Bolivia. There's some, isn't there? Is it Bolivia? Where's the rest of them, Brian? There's like two countries where they occur, I think.
Yeah. There's Bolivia and also Chile.
Chile, yeah.
Yeah.
And they're a long way from the coastline, I believe. They're not like they beached last year.
No, they're part. I think they're in the Atacama Desert, which is which is east of the ocean by quite a bit.
And is that a higher elevation where they are?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, well, something mighty, mighty big happened there. I'd like to see the lay of the land and understand the geology of that, which would explain the paleontology. But, just that whole country over there is just one fascinating thing after another. And that says nothing of the people. The people are wonderful, at least the ones I met. They're different than us. Their ways are different. They have a different culture, different perspective. But I don't know. I thought they were great people.
Yeah, that's where they found two of those little tiny creatures, the Autotoma creature and the attaboy that was it Bailey had, Barnum and Bailey.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think I know what that is. I don't think it was a man. I think it was a baby. Is that the one you're talking about? Back in the 20s or 30s?
Yeah, you're talking about the attaboy, which was the one that Barnum and Bailey had. Yeah, it looked a lot different than the one that the Disclosure, was it Brian Greer had? Much different.
Can you please tell the audience about this? Because I'm not sure that they would be aware of exactly what you're talking about.
Well, the Atacama creature that I was talking about, that's the one that Brian Greer and his team had that it looks like a little tiny alien that's maybe about 7 or 8 inches long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and, I don't know where that is. Is it a museum now, or have they done something with it? Does anybody know where it ended up?
I know that they had it in the Disclosure Project movie. They were doing some DNA testing on it. And
really?
He's also got a new documentary that's about to drop that a major film company is actually backing to put it out. So,
really?
Oh yeah, they've got some major stuff going on in the works over there.
So have they leaked any leaks on what the DNA was?
It was not human. I know that much.
Really?
Yeah, was not human at all whatsoever. Much like whenever Brian did the DNA testing on the Procus skulls, everybody was holding their breath on that, and then when they came out and said, yeah, this is definitely not human, it's like, okay.
Well, actually, I have to qualify that because that was actually the very first test that was done, and it was only one test of one skull. And then afterwards, the geneticist that did the study got fired from his job because he was doing the work. And so scientifically, you can't really say anything when there's only one result. But the ones that were done with L.A. Marzulli indicated, or the only DNA they could figure out was a connection between Europe and the Middle East. So anything that would be so-called alien wouldn't be detectable because the GenBank database can only compare with what they have. So if something would supposedly turn up alien, it would simply be indicated by the machine as being unknown.
But they did rule out that it was not Homo sapien, correct?
Actually, we're still working on that right now. So we're hoping to get probably about 15 to 20 different skulls tested, and that'll give us a decent database from which to make some kind of assumption. But at this point, it's still so preliminary that we can't draw any conclusion. All we can say is that we're looking at some kind of anomaly going on.
And a lot of the research that you've done, Brian, have you encountered much on the elongated head giants?
Not giants so much in Peru. It appears that the Paracas may have been as much as 6 feet or 6'2", which is very tall compared to other Peruvian ancient people. But we actually have Hugh Newman and Jim Vieira coming down next month with a group, and their whole thing is going to be looking for evidence of giants in this area.
Well, I know that Timothy Alberino went down there on the first True Legends documentary they were working on, and he actually went into some of the, the Spanish Catholic documents that they had there. And one of the things that he uncovered was that when the Spanish first showed up there, that they actually found that the people there were worshiping the bones of giants that were 27 feet tall with elongated skulls. And they were in a cave, and they were basically taking people in there and doing blood sacrifices. And basically the Catholics, they took the bones and they took them back to Rome. And
probably,
yeah. But they said that one of the skulls that they had a Spanish rapier sword, and if I remember correctly, I think they said that they are 52 inches long from blade to the handle. They said that they inserted the tip of the blade into the back or through the eye socket, and it touched the back of the skull, and only 2 inches of the handle was sticking out. That's how huge these skulls were.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, I haven't seen physically any giant's bones, but we're still, open to the idea that they may have existed.
Well, the written reports largely collected by the Spaniards and then possibly hidden away from public knowledge in later years is about all I've come up with. There's it's like the $64,000 question: where are the bones? And it plagues all researchers in giants. Where are the bones? That's Vieira can attest to that. But there's so many thousands of reports on them. Why aren't there a few bones around?
Yeah.
Either it's the biggest cover up in the world, or you got to think maybe they don't exist. And that's what a lot of people say. Well, they just don't exist.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, long before the Smithsonian came on board, it was the Catholic Church that was going around all over the planet, and they were erecting these churches on top of a lot of these megalithic sites, especially if they had like underground caverns and underground highways and stuff like that. That was the thing that they uncovered in their second documentary, which is The Unholy See, is that they were finding that a lot of these Catholic churches were built on top of megalithic sites. In fact, I know, Brian, you've actually been into some of these Catholic churches that are built on top of megalithic sites.
Yeah, actually, I'm actually 2 blocks from one of them right now, and my second latest video is documenting the first Catholic churches built in Cusco, and all of them were built on Inca sites, and it is said that each one of those churches does have an ancient shaft that goes down that connects to a system of tunnels.
Wow. Have you got any more? Do you want to elaborate on that? Some of the stories that you've heard?
Oh, sure. Actually, the one that's near where I am right now was the first royal Inca palace. And the Inca built on top of a megalithic site. So Cusco is older than the Inca. And the weird thing is that the present-day bathrooms for the church are underground. So we were able to walk by there at one point, and there was a man cleaning the bathrooms, and he was simply an employee. And we said, why are these bathrooms underground? And he said, because they've always been here. And he alluded to the fact that since he does maintenance on some of the other first churches that were built in Cusco, that he's seen the entrances to shafts that go down and connect into tunnels, but no one is allowed to actually go in and explore them. Maybe in the future, if one was to ask the bishop, one could get permission.
Yeah, I know that one of the people that they talked to in True Legends 2, Unholy See, he actually got permission to go into one of these churches, and where the altar was, they slid it over to the side, and there was an opening that led to underground, and they had he said that the walls were like the megalithic structures above, but it was underground. And he said that they had clearly put up a wall there, but he said that they could see through. There was a few stones missing. They could see through, and it was just all like megalithic stones on both sides, on the top, bottom. And I mean, it was just like this long tunnel that just went off into nowhere. And that, basically they were talking about that these were like underground highways.
This was where, Chad?
Somewhere down in Peru, if I remember correctly.
Right.
Yeah. Like I said, if you guys haven't seen True Legends Part 2, Unholy Sea, I highly advise you both check it out because it's really, really well done.
Sure.
You find the same thing in Malta, and they've just discovered a bunch of new stuff, I think, in Bosnia or somewhere, of all places. They came into a series of caves over in Israel. I think near the Dead Sea. They're digging a big trench through the hills there to put in a highline wire. And here's all these caves in there they didn't know existed. And apparently, don't know who dug them, but they were used by early-day Christians because they had that sort of artifacts or that sort of art on the wall. So, again, it's just it's amazing what you find in the ancient world for us to try to understand how it could be.
You right there, Brian?
Yes, sir.
We thought maybe the aliens were coming to take you away or something.
They wouldn't dare.
I think I know that dog, Brian.
Oh, you probably do.
Hey, aren't you right around the corner from a really great restaurant? A second-story restaurant overlooks the patio there in downtown Frisco.
Well, actually, we've moved. We're actually up on the hill now, so I'm looking down on the city right now.
Oh, okay, all right.
Well, do you guys want to talk about anything that you guys got coming up in the future that people might be interested in tagging along with you guys?
Sure. Actually, I'm really hoping that Joe will be able to come down again. If we find some really intriguing skulls, it'd be great if he could come down and do some casting, because he's done a great service to everybody. The fact that you can purchase replicas, like exact replicas of these skulls through his museum, it would be wonderful if more of them could be cast so that other collections or museums or whatever, or physicians could have a copy to be able to examine them for the details, because the more that we find that are quite strange and obscure, the more medical anomalies are showing up, and so that would be a great thing. And hopefully we'll get L.A. Marzulli to mount another expedition down here, which I think may be in the works, and then to have Joe come along.
Well, if y'all do anything with L.A. and Joe, y'all make sure y'all let me know about it, because I want to tag along as well.
Sure.
L.A. makes it fun.
Oh, yeah, L.A. is a great guy. I love that guy.
Yeah,
He is.
He is.
So what big stuff has Hidden Inca Tours got up its sleeve that people might be highly interested in?
Well, we have this very big tour of Cusco, the Sacred Valley of Peru, Tiwanaku, etc. in November. It's been sold out for quite a while, but that'll be good. And then we have a number of little tours going on. And next year we have our 5th annual trip to Egypt, exploring the Giza Plateau, etc., that people can join up and be part of. Also, I'm going to a thing called what's called Contact in the Desert in May in California. And then June, we have a tour, a celebration of the Inca civilization. And then August, we have a tour specifically about the elongated skulls.
Now, the one that's going to be in Egypt, is that going to include the gigantic stone coffins?
Oh, yeah. The Serapeum.
The Serapeums. Could you talk about that real quick?
Sure. The Serapeum is at a site called Saqqara, which is one of the largest archaeological sites in the world. There's a step pyramid there that's kind of famous. But the Serapeum itself is this series of two underground tunnels discovered or rediscovered in the 19th century by archaeologists. And inside these two tunnels are niches which house 28 boxes, most of which are made of granite, and each box weighs 100 tons.
And what are they on the Moss scale? I want to ask you that real quick.
7 out of 10. So you definitely need probably at least diamond tools in order to be able to carve them. And the stone likely came from Aswan, so that's 500 miles away.
And if I remember correctly, I can't remember. You might need to validate this, but the etchings that are on the boxes were done at a later point in time. The Egyptian hieroglyphs.
Yeah. Well, definitely. Actually, Chris Dunn, who's an engineer, he sent photographs of the boxes to different stone manufacturing companies in the U.S., saying, I have an unlimited budget. How much would it cost to have one of these made? And they all wrote back saying, the only way we can make that is if we're allowed to use 6 pieces of stone, because we don't have the technology to be able to cut the interior out.
Yeah, because they were made from a solid piece of stone, even the lid and everything.
Yeah, the lid was cut from the same piece as the box itself, and the interior is almost as smooth as glass. And the etching on the outside, which is hieroglyphics, looks like it was done by an 8-year-old. So the difference in technology is the difference between black and white.
I've heard of stuff like that in Mexico. This guy said there was a 12-foot coffin that he saw that was polished, so I think it's green granite, polished so smoothly that it was like water.
Yeah, I think that's actually Lord Pakal's tomb. And in Mexico, there are some anomalies that don't fit in with the cultures you think of, just like in Egypt or Lebanon or here in Peru. Archaeologists say, well, they had to have been made by, say, the Inca or the Maya or something, but the level of technology in some cases is beyond 21st century.
Yeah, wasn't the Mexican pyramid where they actually found the what was it, the liquid down there in the bottom of it?
Mercury?
Oh, mercury.
Yes, mercury, that's it. Sorry.
Yeah.
But what did they do with it? Did they leave it there? They siphon it out? How was it contained?
I don't know. That's one of those problems. Is we were there in January, and that I think that was the temple of Quetzalcoatl, and it was all blocked off, so no one was allowed access to even look at it.
You didn't flash your Brien Foerster credentials and just walk right on in there?
I think money works quite often.
Even Irene couldn't get him in. So
unfortunately, no. Yeah, with her smile, that didn't work either. So,
hey,
they're hard.
Was it that you, Brien, that was with LA where y'all were roaming all over the country, and y'all finally got to that cave that had the elongated skulls in it, and y'all were climbing in there and looking at them?
Yeah, with Richard Shaw, and we discovered new kinds of thistles and poisonous plants that we didn't expect. But yeah, that was a great adventure, because that's an example of using local knowledge. We asked local people, is there a cemetery somewhere around here? And finally, we had this, I think, 14-year-old girl guide us into the bush in the woods, and we discovered it. It's quite a reasonably deep cave.
Yeah, it was pretty big. It was pretty extensive, because, like I said, I know that 2 of y'all climbed in there, and actually it was 3 of y'all, and one, he kept going into he was having to climb sideways in there, and he kept coming out and bringing y'all more skulls to look at.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience tonight?
Actually, I'd love to have Joe say some more.
Well, I'm still casting Star Child skulls and the adult found with it. And the jury's still out on that. Melanie and Chase are still doing their tests. So we don't know much yet. That's not, it may be the same as Lloyd Pye's conclusions, or it may be different. But so that's sort of on the burner. 2 weekends ago, I went to the Bigfoot conference over in Jefferson, Texas, where some of the kind of the main guys doing the research were there. Great meeting them and seeing who's doing what. Jeff Meldrum was there and a bunch of other people. Got to visit with them and found out quite a bit of stuff. Then on the way back home to Crosbyton, I took a couple hours out of my way and went up to a little place called Aurora, Texas, like the goddess Aurora, and found the cemetery where this alleged alien was buried, who crashed into a windmill there in 1895. His little metal craft or whatever was coming down and it crashed into a windmill, allegedly broke into different pieces, caught on fire. And some people say that he lived for a while. There's a doctor there that apparently tried to keep him alive, allegedly, and he didn't live. So they buried him, gave him a, quotes, Christian burial. And I found the site. The headstone's been stolen so many times that now they just lay a big rock on the top of a big limestone rock so to keep people from stealing it. But so I thought that was really fascinating. Some of the people that say, they're trying to say, well, UFOs, it's all it is. It's just influence from the 1950s B movies that were made in the 50s, and that's just in people's imaginations. Well, the 1895 crash would say, no, that's not, we've known about this now since the 1890s. And I don't know what the people thought. We're trying to find out more of the story. But back then, I don't know if they even had weather balloons. They maybe had hot air balloons, perhaps, but there were no aircraft that anybody knows anything about. So for something metallic to come flying along and crash and burn, that's really amazing. And the creature was, they put him in a child's coffin, and what they said was he was not of this earth. Now, why would they say that? I don't know. Another report said there was a craft that came through a town south of there a few hours down and was dragging a rope, a chain, a cord, something, and it got caught on the local railroad tracks. You're what? And the report said this little guy came out of the craft in a blue jumper suit, whatever, came down the cable, got it unhooked, went back up in the craft and flew away. And we don't know, was it the same one that crashed in Aurora? It's just a completely wild story. And right out there in the middle of Podunk, Texas, it's mostly a ghost town now. But I never heard of it, and I've been here all my life. So, you never know what's right in your backyard. Brian can attest to that. Stuff is everywhere. So that's sort of my new little back burner quest right now. I want to find out more about that. I want to see if I can contact anyone's living relatives and see if their grandmother, great-grandmother ever mentioned anything about it. One lady said it was all a hoax, so you have to pay attention to that. But apparently there were dozens of people that were involved in it, and they gave descriptions of how the whole thing was. So that's kind of a new thing I want to look into, just see what there is to it. First question anybody asks is, well, why don't they dig it up and see what it is? And the cemetery or whoever owns the cemetery there won't let that happen, at least at this point. Same thing in Peru. It's difficult to you don't just go out and dig stuff up. You got to get permits and all that. But they have meetings there every year about this thing. And here I've lived here all my life and never heard about it. So that's sort of a new quest, and it turns out that same craft or one like it was seen in Louisiana and I believe on the West Coast. And you're going, what? Why have we never heard about this? Why wasn't that in my Texas history textbook? So
Yeah, there's several of those. I know that you one of those you were talking about was the Battle of Los Angeles in 1945. Is that the one you're talking about?
no, this was in the 1895.
Oh, okay, so yeah,
Some
that's.
sort of flying machine was seen.
Oh, you're still talking about the one in Aurora. I thought when you were
Yeah,
talking about the other coast, I thought you were talking about Battle of Los Angeles.
that's a really strange thing too. What the heck was that? What were those lights?
Well,
What
not
were they shooting at?
well, not only that, but also you got MO41, which took place long before Roswell even happened. That happened in was it Missouri? I think it was Cape Girardeau or something like that.
Was that in the 1890s?
That was in 1941. That happened in, like I said, that was in Missouri. That was long before Roswell ever happened. There was a crash out there, and it's referred to as MO41.
Wow, I did not know that. That's amazing.
Yeah, I keep up with all the weird stuff.
Well, apparently that's your job. Me, I've got to make a living.
Chad does great at research. Very good at it.
Well, I got lots of wonderful people to pull from, like Brian and Joe, so it helps.
If you saw my files, you can see I spend a lot of the time every day filing stuff, more papers, more information, and it's just never ending. Once you get into this stuff, it's never ending.
One of the things that I admire you all for is the fact that you're not in competition. You work together to get to the truth. And I think that it's something that you don't hear much of anymore. But I think it's absolutely wonderful that you all are able to work together and get the truth out.
We get along pretty good. I suppose all of us who have the interest, the guts, or the lack of sense to go out and do a lot of these things comes with a fairly strong personality. With strong personalities have strong opinions, and their good qualities are good, their bad qualities are probably bad, worse, and yet we all have a common interest in finding out. Take a subject, these subjects, the Peru stuff, the stones, the people, the UFO thing. We're all interested in knowing. We may go about it differently. We may come to different conclusions, but that's probably our common bond. Brian he's spent a lot of time with a lot of these people, and he knows that, there's a lot of things we don't agree on. Some of the guys that I don't actually know, like I think the guys he's going to be doing some stuff with, I've read some of their stuff. I know I don't agree with it, but a lot of it I do. But like you said, okay, they're willing to put their time and money into going to some place, which is not like going to Acapulco to have a martini and watch the tide come in. That's one thing about
Yes.
Brian. He's been in a lot of places that I don't know if I want to go. But if you don't go, you don't know, and you go, you may find something. And apparently, he's not as paranoid about falling into a deep pit as I am.
Well, it's great because the people that aren't able to get out and do what you all do, we are let in. We get to see it as if we're there. And I enjoy that. I mean, I would love to be able to travel as you all do, but I'm not able to. So you bring it to me, everyone else out there. And I just love it.
That's the beauty of video and photographs. It's a wonderful thing.
Yes. And even the drones. At first, I was a little hesitant with that, but
Yes,
they're used the right way. They're awesome.
Yeah, we love that drone footage.
Yeah,
Great job, Brian.
Yes,
Thank you.
very much so. Chad, do you have any more questions?
I got a million, but I think these guys are probably about ready to kick back and relax a little bit. So I appreciate you guys coming on here and giving us a little bit of your time and reaching out to our audience and letting them into your world a little bit.
Yes, and we'd love to have you back and keep us posted on what you're doing and your findings.
Sure.
You bet. Anytime.
Great. Would you please let everyone know where they can find you at, how they can contact you? Joe, I know that you are raising money right now for your trip to Israel.
Right.
And everybody,
and I'm not.
everybody needs to order some of these elongated casts that he does. They're amazing, wonderful.
Yes, and buy Brian's books. If you could let everyone know where they can contact you, donate, where they can watch you, it would be great.
Well, my website is www.mountblanco.com. That's MTBlanco.com. Should be pronounced Monte Blanco, but we're in Texas, so we say Mount Blanco. But mountblanco.com will get you to my website. And
Wonderful.
on Facebook under Joe Taylor.
And you've got a donate button on your page, correct?
I think so. Yeah, I didn't set the website up. Another girl did, but I think so.
And make sure you plug those giant books that you have also there, Joe.
Yeah, Giants Against Evolution. I published it in 2012, and some of the things that I was talking about then, you were almost afraid to talk about are now subjects of film series, movies, and things like that. So that's been good, sort of reaffirming. Half the book is about the giant people of the earth and different views about them. I tried to cite stories from all around the world, different places, different states in the United States, and to give a variety to show people, look, there really is something out there. And then half the book is on giant animals of the earth, which flies in the face of the old idea that I was taught in school that everything started off small and got bigger and more complex. And what I've found as a paleontologist for the last 30 years and in my research is that just the reverse is true. The supposed older stuff is usually bigger and is certainly always complex, if not more complex. The little three-toed horse is smaller, but it's way more complex than a one-toed horse. And the crocodiles and the salamanders that are supposed to be so primitive and stupid, they got a brain the size of a walnut, and yet they're 12 feet long. Some of them 30, 40 feet long, complex teeth that replace themselves, and on and on. But that's all in my book, Giants Against Evolution, and that's on the website too.
Yes, and I own that book, and it's a must-own.
Great. Everyone check it out. Brian, how about you?
My main website is www.hiddenincatours.com, and though the title says tours, 90% of it is simply free information. I have 860 YouTube videos, photo sets, interviews, etc. on it. So it basically requires almost a full-time webmaster to deal with it because of the level of content, but I want to make sure that people have free access to at least not all of my stuff, but at least most of my stuff.
Yes,
Great.
and it's definitely worth hanging out on because, like I said, between you and Hugh Newman's Megalithomania, I swear I could go on y'all's sites and I can be on there for hours just watching videos and lectures.
A lot of information on there and a lot of film. Brian tends to film like I do. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I see the way he films things. I go, that's the way I would have done that. So, a lot of good stuff.
Everyone check that out too. Never a dull moment, guaranteed. Chad, who did we agree to say the closing prayer?
I'll let you go ahead and do it. You do a great job.
Okay, well, it's all God. Okay, dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for bringing us all together and for the knowledge that you have let us gain and for leading tonight's broadcast. Please look after our listeners and Brian and Joe. Please bless their mission. They're on a mission, Lord, to spread your word and get the truth out. Please let nothing interfere with that and give them, God, your speed and your blessing. And please look after Chad. And we just thank you, Father, for everything. In Jesus' holy and mighty name, amen.
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 Okay. Well, again, thank you so much, gentlemen. It's been a fascinating evening, and we'd like to get you back on and prayerfully be able to get Aaron on with us too.
Sure.
And we'll get that round table discussion going with all three of you.
Sounds good. Okay. Well, Brien, you give Irene a hug for me.
I definitely will, Joe.
Okay.
Okay, that's going to do it for tonight, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. We pray you have a blessed week. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night. Into the night, I raise my hand to the fire, but it's no use, 'cause you can't stop it from shining through. It's true, baby, let the light